All right, back here on Inside Wrestling Radio, and today on the telephone, we have ODB, of course, ODB from TNA, and I've got to say, ODB, before we get going here, one of my all-time favorite female wrestlers. I just love that ODB gimmick and everything that you do with it. But everybody should know, you don't need an introduction. I'm just going to bring you right in here. ODB, of course, from TNA. Welcome to the program, ODB. How you doing?
I'm your favorite girl wrestler, huh?
Absolutely, man. I could watch ODB all day long in the ring.
You like the boob grabbing, the crotch grabbing?
Yeah, listen, what's not to like? You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's
a little rough around the edges, but
and you know what? Before we get into this, one of the things you were doing when you first came into TNA, well, not first came into, but over the last couple of years, was the not just another pretty face line. I thought that was fantastic. Where'd you come up with that?
Actually, Jim Cornette gave that to me. It was right when me and Kong were feuding.
Yeah.
He's like, it was like my first in-ring promo ever. And he's like, you need a little catchphrase. And we were just brainstorming. He's like, not just another pretty face. It'd be perfect for you.
That was really, Cornette really is just a mastermind, because that was just, I thought that was just a stroke of genius. And the way that you played it was really, really well done. Let's go back a little bit, though, before we get into the TNA stuff. Had you always been a fan of wrestling? I know you did some ice hockey, and you were on the first ice hockey team at your high school there. How did you make that transition from ice hockey into pro wrestling, of all things?
Well, I've always been, like a little tomboy growing up, and I loved watching wrestling. Like, my parents took us to old EWA shows, and I even went to some indie shows back in the day and saw like Jumpin' Jim Brunzell, and then I used to go to, they have a gym here in Minnesota, it's called The Gym, where Demolition, Road Warriors would all hang out, and we would all go in there in our Zubas and get autographs and pictures. Yeah, and then I, started playing hockey, and played hockey for a long time, and then went to college, and that didn't work out, and partied good, but
yeah.
Maybe that's when the ODB character started, is in college.
Absolutely, yeah. What better place to start, right?
Yeah. And so then I was watching wrestling one day, and I was like, I want to do that.
Really, kind of, it hit you immediately, and you knew that's where you wanted to go.
Yep, and I knew it wasn't going to be an easy ride, but I did try out for the first Tough Enough, and I'm glad I did that, because it kind of, opened my eyes up to a little part of the business, and I got to meet, Al Snow, Taz there, and I actually told them I was one dirty bitch already.
You'd already made your mind up, right? Tell me a little bit about that process, ODB, when you started that that was the very first Tough Enough. I think they were doing that was that on MTV at the time?
Yep, yeah, MTV.
How did you go about that process? I mean, did they find you, or did you find them, or how did that go about?
I was watching WWF back in the day, and I remember Jersey King Lawler was like, if you have what it takes to be a WWF superstar, Tough Enough is coming out, and then all you had to do is send in a tape of yourself, or VHS back in the day, send in a tape and say why you're tough enough and stuff. So Nick called me right away, and I was one of the top 200, and then I got to go to New York City when they had the WWF New York there.
Yeah, right, yeah, the restaurant thing.
Yeah. And then I went there, and that's where I met like Jackie Gata, because she made the second one, but she was there for the first one. And then I made it to the top 25, but then didn't make it to the show.
So what they just had you guys pretty much in all of you guys in a room and just kind of weeded everybody out? Is that how it went about?
Yeah, it was more MTV, right, because they wanted a reality show, because they're like the first people with the real world and stuff. So WWE they liked me, but MTV said they didn't like me at all, because I didn't really I was shy too back in the day.
Really? That's hard to believe.
Yeah, I was a little shy, so didn't really blossom.
Gotcha. So, but that didn't break your spirit, though, because you left there, went back home, and started really training hard. Who did you train under when you went back to Minnesota?
Yeah, I trained, Eddie Sharkey trained me. He trained from, Road Warriors, Mr. Perfect, Rude, and so I just went to his school, and it was basically, in someone's backyard, and I was the only chick there, and I actually trained with Sean Davari.
Oh, good, yeah. I had Animal on here recently, right after his book was released, and he was telling me about that Sharkey school, and he said that thing was really just really brutal, man. Did they put you through the ringer too?
Oh yeah, they weren't. They looked at me and they're just like, all right, hop in the ring. And, a few people came, out of his camp when I was around, but they didn't take it easy on me.
But don't you agree that, especially now that you have some years in the business, don't you agree that that's really the way to go about training, though? Because it really, I think it weeds out the riffraff, because you got a lot of these so-called schools now popping up and these backyard organizations, and they're so-called training people, but they don't know what they're doing. They get in the ring with a real worker, and then they don't know which way is left or which way is right. So that original old school way is the only way, in my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree, because so many mean, you can get a wrestling school in a Cracker Jack box these days. Like, so many people are like, just want to make money, wherever they can. And I think, if you really want to be a wrestler, you would have to, move away and really go to a good school. And for me, I still think OVW is a place to go. A lot of people came out of there. But I think a lot of people, too, being on the road, that's where I learned most of my stuff. Traveling, 13 hours for a hot dog and a handshake, pretty much.
Yeah, yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. and a lot of these guys now, especially these newer guys who haven't really been trained, I'm not putting a ring up, or I'm not going to drive this much for not gas money.
Oh God, yeah. I was still putting the ring up in OVW. I think you have to go through that. Everyone in this business we're all the same, and some people make it, some people don't. But
sure, yeah. I think that putting, like you're talking about, putting up rings and carrying gear, whatever needed done, that was part of what we used to call paying dues, and it just seems like paying dues are getting to be a thing of the past. And
no one respects the people that came before them anymore. Like, when I don't really do a lot of indies anymore, right. But when I do them, there's so many, Hall of Famers at the shows, and some of these young punks don't get up and shake their hand. They don't give them, a good place in the locker room. And when I know if there's a Hall of Famer on a show with me, I make sure there's a case of beer in the locker room for him.
There you go.
And I make sure, we hang out and have a few drinks, so that's how it's supposed to be, and too many young punks leave after their match, and I'm like, seriously, you're going?
Or worse than that, or worse, they'll go sit in the crowd after their match.
Oh, yeah, with all their friends, and they think they're so cool.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. It's just some of the things that go on I know, because I came up in the late 80s, early 90s to mid 90s working around the NWO and stuff, and
oh, wow.
And yeah, we never, I think of some of the ways that things were going on back then, the way that they would be handled then is so much differently from the way they would be handled now. You would be shown the door in not the nicest of ways back then. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
In 2006, ODB, you went to OVW,
yep.
And is that where you debuted the ODB character?
Yeah, I went there around 2005-ish, I think. So I was there for 2 years until TNA found me. But yeah, I really developed Danny Davis, Al Snow, Greg Gagne actually was there for a little bit. And a lot of people would just come in and out. And Al Snow pulled me aside. He's like, all right, who is ODB? You've got to let her out. I don't get ODB. And I was like, okay. So that's when, the drinking kind of came and the whole, bam, kiss my ass. Because it was basically me holding in because I've heard no so many times and had the door slammed in my face because I wasn't diva material or, So, just basically every time I was up in that ring, I told everyone to kiss my ass.
Right. Just kind of venting some of that real life angst, right?
Yeah, that's the best way to do it.
Absolutely. I like the gimmick that you did in OVW where you basically proclaimed yourself the first ever women's champion. How did that come about?
Yeah, because I actually went to OVW at the right time because it was right when Beth Phoenix, Melina, Mickie James, they all got on the road. Perfect timing for me. And then actually Serena was there with me too, and she wasn't signed either. And Al looked at us. He's like, "Do you guys want to start this women's division up?" We're like, "Hell yeah!" He's like, "All right, let's do this little gimmick here, and we'll actually get an OVW women's title." So we actually, made up the women's title, and then it became an official one.
That's really cool the way that they kind of came, and that speaks to you guys' talent too, because a lot of the females in some of these smaller organizations, we know that they just can't work. You know what I'm saying? But for you, but for you guys to get to work so hard as to get your own division, I respect that, and there's a lot to be said for that.
Thank you. I still look back at OVW days were fun. I mean, we wrestled 7 days a week, and then I worked at I was a bartender at a strip club.
Wow.
So I look back at those were the best days of my life.
Yes.
It was so fun. And everyone that was in my class is on TV right now.
That's awesome. That really does speak to you guys' talent. Let me hold you up right there, ODB. When we get back from the break, I want to talk to you about TNA and what's currently going on with you. And that's coming up next when we get back right here with ODB on Inside Wrestling Radio.